Hello and welcome to Summer Seminar. My name is Brooke Park and I have had the opportunity to teach both first and second grades, and now I serve here at PCA as an elementary principal, have for the past few years, but I'm so excited that you're here and able to join us for Summer Seminar, specifically this session on classroom management. So quiet your brains, take out something to write with, and let's chat for a little bit about some principles that you can use in classroom management, whatever elementary grade that you teach. So as we get started, I want you to imagine your ideal classroom. So if you close your eyes and you visualized yourself as a teacher, what would it look like? Now for me, I'll tell you, if I close my eyes and visualize it, I'm going to see, students sitting perfectly in their seats, ready to listen to every word that I say. They're going to be compliant. They're going to be happy to be at school. They're going to cheerfully do what I ask. They're going to learn everything that I teach them, and we are going to have a great time together. And that kind of is my ideal classroom setting. Maybe some of you are sitting there laughing, thinking like, have you ever taught before? It doesn't always go just how you described. But as we learn and as we grow, we can learn and grow in the areas of classroom management, and it is possible to get your school year started off on the right foot and to have a system in place where you and your students work well together and you're able to accomplish all that you need to accomplish. So we are going to talk about some of those things today. But before we do, we know that it is so important to be prepared to teach the material we need to teach, to follow our curriculum. And you've heard about that in other sessions, but we cannot effectively teach if we cannot manage our students. And if our students aren't managed, then learning doesn't get accomplished, and that's our primary goal. We want children and students to learn. So we have to have managed classrooms in order for that to take place and in order for that to happen. So we're going to talk about some practical ways that we can set ourselves up for success as we get started with this session. First, I want you to think about what God has called you to, though, this year. God has called you to teach. He's called you to your school, to your ministry, to the grade level, to the classroom, and He has students ready to join you in your classroom, and He knows what is before us this year. God's given you that authority of your classroom. So don't walk into it fearful of your students or their parents. Trust that God has a plan for you for this school year. And we know that what God calls us to do, He equips us to fulfill. And so trust that calling that God has given you as you establish your authority there at the beginning of the year. The purpose of education, it's a Bible-based, Christ-centered process of leading a learner to Christ, but we also are teaching them obedience, knowledge, attitudes, skills, so that they can effectively go out and they can be witnesses for Christ. That's our purpose. That's our job. So we're not just educators, we are Christian educators. And our influence, your influence is great. So own your calling that God has called you to. When you establish authority with your students, make sure you keep your word. So be a teacher of your word. If you say you're going to do something, follow through with those directions, and that will gain respect with your students. And be clear and concise. Make sure they know what you're asking of them so that they can meet your expectations. What about classroom management? That's such a big, broad term, right? Classroom management, and it's kind of the not talked about as much topic as maybe your history or your science or your arithmetic. But classroom management it can be defined as the actions teachers take to establish and sustain an environment that fosters students' academic achievement. So it's about all of the things really that you do within the school day. According to Harry Wong, he wrote an article on classroom management, and he kind of described it as the floor of your house. So classroom management, it's not the first thing you notice. So when you walk into a classroom, you might notice the decor or the furniture or how the teacher is explaining the content. But often classroom management isn't the first thing that's noticed. But he said, just like the floor of a house, it's not the first thing that's noticed, but it's very apparent and obvious if it's missing. And I think that would be also true of classroom management. He said if it's missing, no matter what approach or program you're using, you will notice the chaos in the classroom. And we do not want chaotic school years. We don't want chaotic classrooms. So we are going to put some plans in place so that we can have a smooth start to our school year. So the first thing I would challenge you to do is to develop a classroom management plan. And we're going to walk through what a plan like that would look like. You know, a goal without a plan is just a dream, right? And so if we're going to dream, if we're going to have a goal, I want to have better classroom management this year, we have to put a plan in action. We have to take action in order for that plan to get accomplished. So the first thing we need to think of is our routines and our procedures. It's really how you go about your school day. Do you know what routines and procedures you want to put in place in your classroom? I'll challenge you with you need a routine or a procedure for everything that you do. You might think that is so overwhelming. For everything? Well, just start thinking about your school day. And as you think about what the day is going to look like, you'll be able to identify some routines and procedures that you need to put in place. So how do you want your classroom organized? Those are some things that you could consider. What will the students do with their belongings when they come into the classroom? Where will they put them? How will they move about the classroom? What will their traffic patterns look like? How are they going to line up? When will you take attendance? When will you do lunch count? What will your bathroom procedures be? How are they getting to the bathroom? What are your expectations while they're in the bathroom? How will they move about your school? All of those are routines and procedures that you can go ahead and put in place now. So don't wait until that first moment your students walk through the door. You have enough to think about on the first day of school. Start writing down, this is the plan for my classroom. This is how I want things organized. This is the direction we're going to take when it comes to all of those different topics. And go ahead and start working on that routines and procedures plan right now. So developing a classroom management plan, we need routines and procedures. Those need to be clear. You need to have an idea of how you want the classroom to look and what you want your students to do. And then we kind of get down to the specifics. So the first thing that we really want to focus on in a classroom management plan is clarifying our expectations. I don't know if you're like me, but I do not like my expectations, whether it be if I have them for myself or if I have them for other people. I don't like when they're unmet. Maybe I haven't even communicated what I expected in that situation, but you know how frustrated you can get when the expectations that you had for yourself you don't meet, or that you had for another person aren't followed through. We have to make sure we clarify expectations for our students. So that starts with clear and concise directions. We want to give our students clear directions, concise directions, so that they know what we expect them to do. On the elementary level, students want to work for their teachers. It's not super hard to motivate them and get them on your team. And if you tell them this is what we're going to do and this is how I expect you to do it, often they're very ready and willing to meet those expectations when they're clear. So let's think through this for a moment. Let's say first day of school, I go into a first grade classroom. All the students are sitting in their desks, and I tell them just these words on the first day of school: everybody line up. Well, maybe you're already 2 steps ahead of me and you're thinking that was a terrible idea. They're gonna run to get in line. They won't know where to line up. They won't know who should be first, how the door is supposed to get open. There would be chaos in the classroom. And there would be chaos because I didn't clarify what I expected of my students. When we clarify those expectations, they know what to do. So on the first day of school, I would say something like, boys and girls, we're going to line up and leave the classroom for the first time. When we line up and leave the classroom, here is exactly what we're going to do. So-and-so, you're the door holder. You're going to walk to the door, you're going to open the door, and you're going to hold it open for the class. Then I would go on to explain, this is where I want the girls to stand. This is where I want the boys to stand. This is how I want you to exit the classroom. And there is a lot of talking that takes place at the beginning of the school year, so your students know exactly what they're supposed to do and how you want them to do it. Every part of the day needs an explanation at the beginning of the school year. You are talking them through what's coming next and what to do. So we want to give instructions. We want to watch that the students follow our instructions, and then we want to praise them for doing a good job. Hey, I told you what to do. You did exactly what I asked you to do. Great job. We're going to have a great school year together because we're all working together on the same team. Give them that immediate praise because that makes them want to do it again. Remember that the younger the students are, the more explaining and training they're going to need. There is a huge difference between a child who is 6 and a child who is 12. And elementary spans a very wide range of ages. So the younger the child is, the more training we have to give them. As they mature and grow older, the less training we give them. But at the beginning of the year, they all need a lot of training as they're transitioning into your classroom for that year. Well, in just a moment, we are going to take a trip into Ms. Howe's first grade classroom. And while we're there, I want you to look at how she clarifies her expectations for her students. She's going to teach them how to do something. She's going to give them this instruction, and then watch as she follows through, watch as she practices that instruction with her students, and then look at how quickly she praises them for a job well done. Let's take a look at Ms. Howe's classroom now.
Students watching, for the next few moments, we're going to take a little bit of time and just talk about some habits. Now, a habit is something that you do without even thinking at all. Sometimes our habits are good and sometimes our habits are bad. We want to make sure that as we begin our first grade school year together, that we have good habits that we do together so that we can learn and listen very easily. One of the first things I want to talk to you about is a good habit with the way that you sit. Now, students watching, your chair might look just a little bit different from my chair, but I want you to see and watch how I sit in a chair because that's the way I want you to sit as well. Whenever you sit, when it's time to do school, I want you to sit up straight and tall. Because when you sit up straight and tall, it's easy for your eyes to be able to see the teacher, which means your ears can listen, and that means that you can learn. So notice how I'm sitting up straight and tall in my chair, and students watching, I hope that you are too. I know our boys and girls in this classroom, they look good as well. The next thing I want you to notice are my feet. I have my feet right on the floor, and that again helps me to have good posture. Posture is the way I sit and stand, and we want to make sure that we keep our bodies healthy by having good posture. Now I want you to notice my hands. Right now, I haven't asked my hands to do any work, so they're just resting in my lap. But they're ready. Whenever the teacher might have a job, those hands are ready to go to do the job that she asks you to do. So my back is straight so that my ears can listen and my eyes can watch. My feet are still on the ground so that I have that good posture for a healthy body. And then my hands are resting but ready to do any job that we've been given. Why don't we take just a moment and why don't we practice? Now, students watching, boys and girls in this classroom, probably pretty often you'll hear me say these words. I'll say the words chair, check, position. And when I say the words chair, check, position, here's what I want. Back straight, feet flat, hands ready, eyes watching, ears listening. But there's one very important part of chair check position I haven't talked about yet, and it's my favorite part. You see, whenever we do chair check position, it means we're ready to learn. And learning is so much fun. So the most important part of chair check position is to have a great big smile on your face. Now, let's practice something. You ready? Students watching, boys and girls in this classroom, you ready to go? In a moment, I'm going to say chair check position. And when I do, I want to see who can obey so quickly and so quietly. But then let's find something out. What happens when you give a smile to me? Do you think that you'll get one back? Let's find out. Ready? Chair, check, position. Ooh, look at this. Oh, students watching, I see your smile too, and I love it. Our boys and girls in this classroom, you have the biggest, brightest, best smiles. Oh, and you're so still. Oh, I'm gonna come just peek right over here next to Savvy. Students watching, you come join me. Do you see? Savvy straight back. And I have Benjamin's smile. And Aria is so still, and Titus's eyes are right on me. Excellent job with chair check position, students watching. I like how you're working too.
Did you enjoy going into Miss Howe's classroom? I hope you did. Did you see how she was teaching them this is how you sit in your chair? These are the expectations that I have. They were so clear. The students would definitely know what Miss Howe is expecting of them. Then she watched that they could do it, and she praised them when they did a good job. That is exactly how we need to begin our school year. And it's with every little thing. If they're standing, if they're sitting, whenever you're introducing something new to them, explain it, make sure it's clear, that your expectations are set, and then watch that they followed through. Now we're going to go to Mrs. Chappell's class. She teaches a different age level. She teaches second grade, but right here at the beginning of the year, she is working on some of these same things with her students. So watch how Mrs. Chappell communicates the same information a little bit differently with her students and how much faster they pick up on those expectations that she set.
I think some of you brought your posture pals with you today. I can tell Layla did and Journey did. Students watching, do you have your posture pals? Posture pals help us to have good posture at school. The first posture pal are your eyes. Are you looking at your teacher right now? Are you watching me? So you know exactly what you're supposed to do. You're not looking around the room, students watching, you are paying attention. Your eyes are posture pals. So always make sure your eyes are being attentive. What about your hands? Hold your hands up for me. Show me all your fingers. Wiggle them at me. Your hands are posture pals. Now, when we're in the classroom and we're having school, you want to just rest your hands in your lap. That just keeps them from getting distracted, right? You don't want to distract your friends. So your hands are rested in your lap. But when you stand up, your hands fall down at your side and they just hang there very nicely. So everybody stand up. Whoa, Isaac was fast. His hands just dropped right to his side. That's a good posture pal. You may be seated. There's a third posture pal, your feet. Now, your feet take you places, don't they? Where do you like to go on Saturday, Kason? Where do your feet take you? Do you go to the park? To your neighbor's house? Those are some good places, aren't they? Atlas, where do you like to go on Saturday?
I think I just like to stay at my house and do something fun.
All right, well, a lot of people like to do that, but you walk through your house, don't you? So on Sundays, my feet take me to church. Do you go to church, students watching? So your feet take you places, don't they? But in the classroom, you don't want your feet to be distracting. So your feet need to be very, very still so that you can pay attention and your posture pals can work. So you check your eyes, your hands, and your feet, and you will be able to learn so much in second grade because you have your posture pals.
Did you enjoy seeing Mrs. Chappell's classroom as well? I hope you did, and I hope you're starting to get some ideas about things that you can go ahead and already plan for right now before the school year even starts, so you can make sure that you've set clear expectations for your students. So we're developing this classroom management plan. Number one, we want to clarify our expectations, but next we want to determine our procedures. Now, I talked to you a little bit already about routines and procedures and how they are crucial into having a classroom that runs and is managed smoothly. But we're going to focus a little bit more on those procedures. Everything that takes place within the classroom should have a way that things get done. We need procedures for non-academic times. So think about times in your day that are non-academic. For me, I automatically think of any time we leave the classroom. We're going to lunch, we're going to recess, we're coming into school, we're going home from school. Those are non-academic times, and if we're not careful, we put so much emphasis on the academic times of our day that It's harder to manage our students during those non-academic times, but let's purpose to have some routines, some procedures in place for those times of the day. Be clear with your expectations and then determine those good procedures. So we need those procedures for non-academic times, but you would agree with me, we also have to have procedures for academic times. Now I know some procedures will vary based on your ministry, your age level, where you're teaching, what the expectations are within where you teach, but we need some procedures for academic times. How are they going to answer your questions in class? Are they going to raise their hand and you only call on students whose hands are raised? Are you just going to call on students at random? How will they respond when you ask them a question? I know in elementary school here, students stand to answer questions. That's just one of our routines that we have. What will those procedures and routines look like? Will they stand behind their desk? Will they stand beside their desk? Will they be in front of their desk when they're standing up and participating? All of those little things, you might think this is so insignificant, but little things are a big deal. They're important. And when we can make a routine out of something small, it just allows your classroom to run even smoother. What happens if you're in the middle of a lesson and your student's pencil breaks? How do they communicate that to you? What do they do? How do they get a new pencil? All of those routines and procedures you can establish and students can learn. How are they going to pass back papers? What are they going to do? How will they get them from one student to the next? Will they pass across the classroom? Will they pass behind the classroom? Just some things for you to start thinking through as you're preparing to start your school year. So let's talk through a procedure together, an academic procedure. It's arithmetic class, and every day in arithmetic class, students are going to need their arithmetic worksheet and they're going to need a pencil. So when the school year begins, I'm going to give them an instruction very similar to this. Now it's time for arithmetic. When I say prepare for arithmetic, this is what I want to see you do. I want to see your arithmetic paper on your desk, your pencil on your desk, and then stand beside your chair or beside your desk. I'm going to explain that to them, and then I'm going to say, I hope you remember what I just said. Show me what it means to prepare for arithmetic. Then I'm going to start watching my students. Are they taking out their pencil? Are they taking out their paper? Did they stand beside their desk? And we're going to do this every day. After a few weeks of school, I should be able to very quickly, between subjects, simply say, prepare for arithmetic, and my students automatically start moving because they know what to do. This is going to save you time as your school year goes on, and it's going to save you words. It's important to communicate effectively with our students, but if there are some shortcuts we can take to protect our words and to protect their listening skills, we want to do it. Put procedures in place for each academic subject so that they know exactly what they're supposed to do when you're transitioning to a new subject of school. The more you think through your procedures right now, the less frustrated you're going to be when situations arise that you have not thought of a procedure for. We make so many decisions as teachers at school, right? And we wear so many different hats. So you're a teacher, but sometimes you're the nurse. Sometimes you're that mom in the classroom occasionally. You are wearing lots of different hats, and our brains can only hold so much information. So if you've determined those procedures, and if you're able to find shortcuts or ways to get students ready quicker, you're going to have more time to teach, and you're going to have more time to communicate that academic material. So procedures are so important to establish. I would encourage you, take your schedule, whatever it looks like for your day, and start there. Start from the first moment of school. What's going to be my procedure as they enter? What's going to be my procedure for this first subject? How will I transition from this subject to this subject? Write it down. That way you've done the hard work. And then when the school year starts, you have that as a reference point. You can go back and think, oh, that's what I decided I wanted to do. Let me try it that way this time, and maybe it will work a little easier. But with this plan, maybe you have procedures you've written down and you go to execute those procedures and things do not go the way you envisioned them going. change your procedure. They can learn how to do something new. One part I love about my job is I get to go into different elementary classrooms, sometimes and sub for a long period, sometimes for a short period. And a few weeks ago, I was subbing and I had given them an instruction, and I'm thinking I'm going to be, really clear and concise. They're going to know my expectations. So we had finished taking a test, and I told them, I want you to finish, your seat work, and then you can get a book to look at until we're done. I gave them that instruction, and then I said, get busy. And 15 of them got up at the same time to go get a book. And there were children everywhere. And the expectation I gave them, they met it. They were doing what I said. But in my mind, as I'm watching it play out, I realized this is not what I want. This was not what I envisioned when I gave them those explanations. So I had to backtrack. Everybody go sit down. We're going to do it a different way. When you've finished your work, I want you to just look at me and give me a thumbs up. I'll give a thumbs up back to you, and that's your signal. You can then get up, and then you can go get a book. And I want you to keep that book all the way until we're done with this section that we're doing, and then we'll move on to the next subject. But what I found interesting was I was able to realize that a change needed to take place. Maybe you're thinking through your year last year, if you're a veteran teacher, and you're thinking, man, there were things that happened last year, and I just didn't like how it went. Well, have you been able to identify what the problem was, and then have you been able to figure out a solution to that problem? You don't have to go through every day of school thinking, I just don't like how pack-up is going. I really don't like how my students look in the hallway. Take some time, figure out what can I do to change this procedure so that I am more comfortable with it and that my students are able to be managed more effectively. And that will really, really help as you get this school year started. We're going to take another trip right now into Miss Amsbaugh's 4th grade class. Now, Miss Amsbaugh, she is a wonderful teacher, and I love being a part of her classroom and seeing what her students are doing. But in this video, it's very early on in the school year, and what I really want you to see is how she's explaining a specific procedure. They are setting up their paper for story problems for the first time. Miss Amsbaugh's prepared. She has a way she wants this paper set up for story problems, and she's going to communicate that procedure to her students, and she's going to give them some clear expectations of what she wants to look for on that paper. So go and watch Miss Amsbaugh, look and see those clear explanations of procedures, and then maybe that'll also jumpstart you as you're thinking about some of those academic times and the procedures you need to put in place.
If you look at this paper, you should have an extra piece of paper that you use for story problems each day. Students watching, make sure you always have one in case we have story problems. Right now, pick up your pencil, and I want you to set up your paper just like I set up mine. You'll put your name. You won't put Miss Amsbaugh, you'll put your name. On that first line, you put today's date, and then put story problems on the middle line. So name, date, story problems. The date's not as important because we just reuse this. So we're going to be using this every single day. Now let's look at letter B. While you're setting up that paper, I'm going to read it to you.
Did you enjoy being in Miss Amsbaugh's classroom? I hope you did. It was a short clip, but I know that you were able to see that procedure clearly explained from Miss Amsbaugh. So we're clarifying our expectations. We're having clear procedures. We're communicating those procedures to our students. And then thirdly, as we're developing our classroom management plan, we want to plan positive reinforcement. So we want to solve a problem before the problem begins. That's our goal. We want to solve problems before they become problems. And positive reinforcement really helps that to happen. It's crucial that you are developing a positive classroom. I often think, would I want to be spoken to in a certain way, or would I want my children to be spoken to in a certain way? And when we think about our words, The Bible tells us pleasant words are as an honeycomb, sweet to the soul and health to the bones. That's Proverbs 16:24. We want to represent Christ every day in our classroom with our words and the environment that we're setting our students up for success in. So we should be pleasant and positive in our communication with students. If you're positive with your students, they are going to work for you and want to do what you're asking them to do so much quicker than if you're negative with your students. Constantly look for ways to reinforce good behavior, good choices, good thinking. We're training them in obedience, in knowledge, in attitudes, and skills. Why? To serve Jesus Christ effectively. And we have so many opportunities to invest in our students. Our voices, I think, whether we like it or not, our voices are going to be in their head. And when they hear your voice in their head, what are they going to think of? I hope they think, man, my teacher loves me. My teacher cares about me. She is kind. Her words are kind. Her expression is pleasant. We want our students to think good thoughts of us because we are showing them what it means to be a Christian and we're emulating Christ to them. Purpose right now, I'm going to have a positive classroom. One little trick, if you ever have to say something negative, try to double it up afterwards with 2 positive things. So if you have to correct a student, go ahead and follow that up and give other students a double positive. That way, the tone of your classroom is still positive. Being positive really helps prevent problems before they even begin. So positive reinforcement, it can look a lot of different ways based on your personality, based on the age of the students that you're teaching. The younger the students are, they love to be in the spotlight, don't they? They want you to notice them. They want their friends to notice them. And so if you make a big deal about what they're doing, so that other students can even see that, they're really proud. They want their teacher to say the same thing about them. So then they start working harder. The more quickly they respond to public verbal praise really depends on their age and how young they are. We want to use our words to build our students up, to foster a spirit of kindness in our classroom. If your students are not kind to one another, take a step back and think, am I being kind to my students? Because we want to emulate kindness to them so then they can go and take that kindness to their friends in the classroom. Use your face to communicate positive reinforcement. They're going to look at you all day. We want their eyes to be on us as we're teaching. So what does your face communicate to them? Our faces can communicate a lot, can't they? They can communicate that we're happy. They can communicate that we're frustrated. And make sure you're using your face so that it's communicating positive things to your students. We're giving them that positive reinforcement. A smile goes a long way, doesn't it? Maybe they do something in class that you noticed and no one else noticed, and you just look at them, you make eye contact with them, you give them that smile, and it was just between you and that student, and they know, okay, my teacher noticed. She's proud of me. She was aware that I made that good choice, or I worked really hard to get that right answer. So use your face to communicate positive reinforcement to your students. We're going to take another trip into Miss Howe's classroom, and it's at the beginning of the year, but I did want you to see how she continually uses positive reinforcement. Maybe you're thinking, well, she's being videoed. Of course she has to use positive reinforcement. She does this every day with her students. And so take a look at what they're doing and practicing and how she's reinforcing all of their actions in a positive way. And when we do that, we're really going to see that the amount of problems we have with students that we have to correct, they really decline based on how positive we are with them.
Now, sometimes I'll have everyone stand. Sometimes I'll break us into groups by boys and boys watching or girls and girls watching. But there's other groups that I might have stand as well. And the group might be our rows. Now, students watching, why don't you follow me all the way over here, because we're going to start with our very first row. So Kobe and Aslan and Tanner, you're going to sit at row 1. And sometimes I'll say, row 1, stand. Row 1, stand. Nice, that was fast. Students watching, don't you like the way they stood quickly? Row 1, sit. Now I'm going to come over to Savvy and Benjamin and Ava's row. And students watching, this is going to be a really important row for you because we're going to call this your row. And every time I have row 2 stand and do something, students watching, that is going to be your cue to join them as well. So row 2, students watching, that's you, stand. Nice, row 2, sit. Can you see, students watching, why I chose you to work with row 2? They're so fast to obey and they're so quick to listen. Over here with Emery, Victoria, and Titus, did you already figure out what row you're going to be? I think they know. Students watching, do you know too? You're going to be row 3. So row 3, stand. Nice, row 3, sit. And row 3, do something. I want you to just take row 3, take a quick peek at Tanner. Students watching, why don't you peek at Tanner too? Tanner is so still and he is so straight. He is not moving even though it is not his turn. Tanner, I'm going to come over and give you an air high five because I like how you let other people practice but you still pay attention. Ready? Whoop. Got it. Students watching, I hope you're acting just like Tanner. Great job, row 3. Okay, can you figure out my last row inside of this classroom? It is the row that belongs to Hayden, Trey, and Aria. Students watching, tell them their row number. And Aria, did you hear them tell you your row number? What row number are you, Aria?
4.
That's it, row 4, stand. Good job, row 4, sit. Ah, Victoria was really watching. Good job, boys and boys watching. Good, girls and girls watching. Everyone's sitting.
Did you notice how positive Miss Howe was with her students? I hope that you're thinking, how can I be positive with my students this school year? Pray and ask the Lord to help you. Ask Him to show you areas that you can invest in them personally and be positive with them. We've talked a lot about positive reinforcement with our words, with our face, but what are some other ways we can motivate our students in a positive way to avoid these problems before they even begin? One way is adding interest to your lessons. I know this has probably been discussed in other sessions you've been able to listen to, but we need to make our lessons interesting so that we can captivate our students and we can keep them engaged. Add a story to your lesson. Use students to illustrate concepts. Keep them engaged and make your lessons interesting. Another thing you can do, you can move with urgency throughout your lesson. If you notice them starting to get restless, well, it's time to get them up, doing something different. If you're moving with urgency and if you're getting your students up and down and they're participating, you're going to prevent problems during your academic teaching times from happening because they don't have time to come up with anything else because you're keeping them so busy. I'm sure you've heard the saying, if you don't have a plan, your students will. And I think we could all say that their plan is not going to be what our plan is. So we have to keep them busy, move with urgency throughout your lesson so that they don't look for other ways to occupy themselves. A little story for you. I was teaching 2nd grade and I had a student and she didn't pay the best attention. And I didn't notice one day while I was teaching that she wasn't paying attention until the fire alarm went off. The fire alarm went off, we have to move quickly, we need to leave the classroom, and she had tied her shoelaces to her desk while I was teaching. I didn't know I was teaching. I wasn't watching my students as carefully as I should, and we had to get creative really quick in order to figure out how to get her shoelaces untied from the desk so we can all exit the building for this fire drill. And looking back, I think I could have prevented that from happening if I had moved with a little bit of urgency. If I'd had my student standing up more, she wouldn't have had time to sit at her desk and tie her shoelaces to it. And it was a lesson well learned from this shoelace tying to the desk experience that I had that school year. So we want to keep our students busy. We want to move with urgency. Another way to motivate them is to keep them engaged and involved. Have them come up to the front of the room to illustrate concepts. You might say something like, oh, in arithmetic today, I'm going to need some friends to come up to the front and help me with something. Well, that's an easy motivation for your students because they all want to be the one to come to the front. And they're going to start working hard so you'll notice them so you can use them at the front of the classroom. Have them come up to the chalkboard or the whiteboard and write something. That's something that students love to do. Also, you give them responsibilities in your classroom. We're teaching them how to be responsible, and they can do simple jobs. They can take out the trash, they can wipe the boards, they can clean other things, and they like having a job or responsibility that is all theirs. So that's a great way to motivate your students in a positive way. Another thing we have to do as teachers is we have to think creatively. You might think, I am not a creative person. I'm not saying you have to make all of these extravagant visuals for your students to see, but be creative in your thinking. And this is kind of what I'm thinking about. Use things that are already built into your curriculum for your advantage. So if you think, oh, I need a way to motivate my students, I need something for them to work towards, well, look and see what's happening in curriculum. Are you teaching science and there's a science experiment coming up? Students are very interested in anything they can use their hands with. They want to be hands-on. They want to be a part of that curriculum, of that experiment. Is it art day? Do they need a lot of little pieces to make their art project? Have them collect those pieces throughout the day so that when it's time for art, they have everything they need. That's an easy way to motivate your students. What about if you go to the library? Could they sit on a pillow instead of a chair? Could they check out a special book or a fun book? Think about when you're going outside for recess, maybe students who are working hard, they get to go play on the playground first. Who doesn't want to go play on the playground first? Those are easy ways to keep our students engaged and motivate them. You're going to be more successful as a teacher, and your students are going to be happier if your classroom environment is positive. So plan for ways to be positive. If you need to connect with students, maybe you need to work on some individual connection with students. I will say the best thing that you have that you can work with to your advantage is going to be building relationships with your students. When your students know that you're invested in them, that you care about them well beyond the walls of your classroom, that's when you're really going to start to see opportunities and ways to help them grow in their character. That's what we want to see. We want to see our students grow in their character as they're with us throughout the school year. So as you're planning your motivations for your students and you're thinking through your lessons, tailor your illustrations and games to your class's personality. Do you have a lot of boys that have a lot of high energy? Have you ever thought of using the coach and the team analogy? That was one of my favorite things to do at the beginning of the school year, was to tell them, hey, we are all on the same team. I'm the coach, you're the players, and if the coach gives a direction, this is how we're going to follow it. Maybe you've spent some time at students' games before, baseball games, soccer games. It is pretty incredible the look on their face when their teacher shows up to their game. They're shocked, they're surprised. They realize, wow, she cares enough about me to come watch me play soccer or me play baseball. If you're having a hard time reaching a student and they play a sport or they're in an extracurricular activity and you can go watch them do whatever it is they're doing, that's going to really help your relationship with that student moving forward. Be aware of the student. Watch them. Do you make eye contact with your students each day? Isn't it special when your eyes connect with somebody else's eyes, when you know, hey, they're listening to me, they see me, we're having a conversation? Do that with your students. Make sure you're making eye contact with them. Make that a goal for whatever the first subject of your day is. For us in elementary, it's Bible. So when Bible begins, one thing I love to do is start going down the rows and looking at the students. And I try to look at them until their eyes meet mine. And it's just another way to say good morning. And it's another way to say, hey, I'm glad you're here. I see you. We're going to have a great day together. And it gets us started off on the right foot. So make sure you're aware of your students. Make those personal connections. Questions like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? What are you going to do after school? Do you have siblings? What's your dog's name? When you start to learn more about them, then you're able to use that knowledge in conversations with your students to continue to help them in class and also continue to make that positive impact on them. So we've talked about clarifying our expectations in our classroom management plan. We've talked about determining our procedures. We've looked at planning positive reinforcement, and now we need to talk about planning logical consequences. It's probably our least favorite thing to do as teachers is to give students consequences. And really, when you have a good classroom management plan in place, the consequences that you give will be fewer, much fewer, than if you do not have a plan in place. We don't want to give our students consequences, but sometimes we need to. Why? Because we need a change in behavior. We want to redirect the students so that we can restore them to whatever is going on in the classroom. So most of what we've talked about has been preventative steps that we can take. And that's always where we want to go first. We don't want to be a dictator or a Nazi in our classroom. We want to prevent problems from happening. And if you have those clear explanations, you're prepared to teach. You're prepared to teach so your eyes can be on your students. You're going to eliminate a lot of those problems before they begin. And those things all help. And I will say consistency is going to be your best friend. It's going to be your key in those logical consequences, because students will very quickly know if you give one student a consequence for something, but you don't give the next student who does it a consequence for that same thing, they're going to start to realize, hey, there's some inconsistency here, and maybe I'll just keep trying it. They didn't get in trouble when they did it, so maybe I'll try and see what happens to me. We have to be consistent and ask the Lord every day, Lord, help me to be consistent when I give consequences, and specifically pray and ask the Lord to help you to catch the first offender. It's hard to catch the student who does it first. Maybe a note is getting passed and you catch the note being passed, but that student was really the third or the fourth recipient of that note. Well, we want to try to catch the first offender, because if we can get that first person on board with us, the one who starts the talking without permission or who starts the laughing at something that's really not funny, if we can catch them, then that lets the other ones know, oh, I don't need to try. She's going to see it. It's not worth it. We want to ask the Lord to help us to catch that first offender. With consistency in your classroom, what are the consequences going to be for academic procedural things? This might be something that your school already has in place that you just follow. So what if they don't have their homework done? That should be something consistent throughout your classroom. If you don't have your homework done, this is what happens. In lower elementary, if they don't have their homework done, then it's 1 minute off of their playtime. And that doesn't seem like a big consequence, but to a 6-year-old, 1 minute? I don't want to miss any minutes from playtime. And it works for them. They want to enjoy all of their playtime. So the consequence should fit the age level that you're working with. And also, never when you're giving consequences, don't take away all of something. Because if you take away everything, what do they have left to work towards? So if you say you've lost all of your recess time, well, why would they start working for you now? Because you've taken away all of something that they enjoy. So don't take away things in their entirety on the elementary level. What are your procedures going to be like for moving around the classroom? Can they get up without permission, or can they only get up with permission? What about communicating? Do they communicate only with permission to each other, or can they communicate without permission? And if you have set clear expectations, hey, when I'm teaching, nobody's talking to each other, and you've let them know that, you've practiced what that means, you've showed them what they look like, what it looks like, when a student tries to push those boundaries, how will you respond? Have that consequence ready and in place so that you can take care of it quickly and keep getting back to teaching. Remember, training your students begins the first moment of the first day of school. So as soon as they open the door to your classroom, you are starting that training with them. You're starting to clarify your expectations. Welcome to school. When you come in, you're going to come in quietly. You're going to go to your seat. You're going to open up your backpack. You're going to unpack. You're giving them these procedures that you want done so that they know what to expect. When you're working with a student, remember to always discipline privately and praise them publicly. We don't want to embarrass a student when we're helping them. We want to take care of it privately with them. That might mean you go whisper in their ear. It might mean you take them out of the classroom for a few moments, and in a calm, controlled tone, you let them know, hey, what you're doing needs to change, or the consequence will become greater. But don't embarrass them in front of their friends. Discipline privately, praise publicly. Spend some time planning how you're going to respond to problems that arise in your classroom. What are your steps going to be? So if a student doesn't follow your directions, what will you do? What's the first thing that you do? Here's a few things that you need to consider. Have a teacher look or a teacher face. Something that communicates to the students, oh, that was not something that I should do. And I know that not because my teacher told me with her words, but she showed me with her face that that was not something that she wanted done. So work on that teacher look. It's often a blank stare. You might pause your lesson and look at that student until they realize, oh, she stopped for me. I need to change what I'm doing. So pause your lesson, look at your students. You might need to say their name so they're not paying attention. You're teaching, and as you're teaching, you just need to insert their name into what you're teaching about. Today we're going to learn about verbs, Sally. And hopefully when Sally hears her name, she'll pick her head up and think, oh, I need to learn about verbs today too. That was my teacher's reminder for me to pay attention and for me to focus. So these are all ways that we're trying to redirect students before the problem becomes big. If they are not disrupting the learning environment, but you've worked with them, you've said their name, they might need to stand up by their desk to help get them focused back on you. And then when they do, you can say, thank you for fixing it. I'm glad your eyes were on what we were doing. Now you can sit back down in your seat. If that doesn't work, they might need to stand in the back of the classroom so that gets their attention a little bit more. These are all kind of steps you can take. So think through, if a student isn't paying attention one time, we don't want to skip all of these little steps and go all the way to something big, like, hey, go to the back of the classroom. There's things we can do, steps we can take, so that we don't have to get to the bigger steps. If they're disturbing your learning environment, you cannot teach because they're disrupting the learning environment. You might need to move their seat. If you can't teach, then they have to have a change of behavior. So maybe moving them to the back of the classroom, that might help them realize, oh, she was serious. I need to stop what I'm doing. We have to protect the learning environment of our classroom. So maybe you've paused and you've looked at them. You've said their name. You've had them stand. You've followed all of these steps, and that still isn't producing the change in behavior that we need to see to be successful. Maybe you need to take them out of the classroom and have a chat with them. Listen, I have done so many things to try to help you today, and it's not working. What's going on? What's the problem? Often, if you take a few minutes to listen to your students, you learn a lot about them. Maybe they didn't get enough sleep the night before. Maybe they skipped breakfast and they're just really hungry. Often, if there's a sudden change of behavior at school, something is changing at home. And although it's not really our business or our job to know everything about their home life, if something is changing at school and it's sudden and it's drastic, often that is an indicator that something's also going on at home, and it might need to be a follow-up call to the parents. Hey, they just haven't been themselves. I've had a hard time keeping them motivated. He or she looks really tired. Do you have any ideas or suggestions of things I can do to better help them at school? When parents know you care about their child, they want to work together with you as a team. So use parents, work alongside them so that we can have the student's best interest in mind. If you've continued to work with them and we haven't had a change of behavior, You've followed the steps that you know to put in place. You've spoken to them outside of the classroom. You've given them consequences in your classroom. Maybe they have to sit by themselves for a short time. Maybe they've missed some of this recess time, or maybe some of art class, or another privilege. You've taken a privilege away and it still hasn't worked. Then at that point, you do need to follow up with a parent. You do need to get some help at home. And often, I think just like the Lord has to sometimes make things uncomfortable for us to change our behavior or to get our lives back to where they need to be, sometimes we have to make things uncomfortable for the student. And if our consequences at school aren't working for them, then we do need to get parents on board because they better know their child and they can better help. Ask your principal for help. If you can't teach, and if you say, I'm prepared, I'm urgent, my classroom management plan is in place and I'm running it effectively, this student is not ready and willing to cooperate with me. And here's all the things I've done. And if you come to your principal with that, hey, this is what I've tried and it hasn't worked, can you help me? Sometimes the student leaving the classroom for a few minutes works. Sometimes the principal just working with that student, we will see a change in behavior in them. So I hope that those tips, those steps help you as you're thinking through some of your consequences. Another thing when you're working with children, don't expect their attitudes to instantly improve just because you ask them to. It might take them a little bit of time. Sometimes they might need time and they might need space in order for their attitude to completely change. So give them some grace on days that you can, just as the Lord gives us grace on a daily basis. I said earlier, your greatest asset's going to be building those relationships with your students and their parents. When they know that you're all on the same team, they're going to be much more ready and willing to do what's right and to work with you. Know your students. Show them care and concern. You can pinpoint potential problem areas as you get to know your students. And one quote I wanted to share with you about classroom management and discipline, I love this one. It says, a good seating arrangement is the best form of classroom management. Sometimes we just need to separate students and everybody needs to sit beside somebody different. So if they start to get restless with each other, move their seats, change it up, and see if that makes a difference in your classroom. The younger the children are, remember, the more training that they need. One other thing about logical consequences, don't major on the minor. Don't be super nitpicky about little things that students are doing that maybe it bothers you, but it doesn't affect the learning environment of your classroom. And as you get to know your students, you will be able to pinpoint some of those ideas. So we've talked about those procedures that we've put in place, about our clear expectations, about our logical consequences. We've talked about positive reinforcement, and our last thing we're going to talk about is planning our responses. You need, as a teacher, to visualize yourself in calm control of your classroom so that you can already have thought through, if a student does this, this is how I'm going to respond. We can't think through everything that students will do, but we can think through some of them. So have a written out plan. What am I going to do in these situations? What am I going to do if a student talks without permission? What am I going to do if a student tells me no? What will I do if they're unkind? What will I do if they don't want to do their work? And when we know, okay, if this happens, this is how I'm going to handle it. If we have those things in place, we're not going to be as frustrated with students, and we're going to be able to respond to them like Christ instead of react to them based on our emotions and their actions. So pre-thinking through these situations allows less opportunity for us to react wrongly in the moment. Have you ever had to just stop and take a deep breath before you talk to a student or say, I'm going to have to do something about this? You might not know what you're going to do yet, but you know something has to be done. If you start to feel yourself getting frustrated or flustered, breathe, stop for a few moments, and then respond to the students like Christ. So let's recap a few takeaways of things that you can do now to prepare to have effective classroom management. Right now, before school even begins, you can have a written plan of action. I hope you started that plan as you were listening to this session. Don't let thinking about all of these things in the moment hold you up from having this clear plan of action at the beginning of the school year. Start writing things down. Have a plan. Clarify your expectations, determine your procedures, plan positive reinforcement, plan logical consequences, and then plan your responses. I hope you're looking forward to the school year, and I hope that this was helpful to you as you interact with your students on a daily basis. And I do pray the Lord's richest blessings on you, your ministry, and your classrooms as you continue on this school year.